Wayne is the KiCad project lead. If you saw his talk yesterday on bug reporting, I will not repeat the introduction, but I do want to give a very quick overview. Wayne has been the project lead for a number of years. For those of you who are longtime KiCad users, you will remember what the project looked like before Wayne took over and what the project looks like today. This is not an accident. This is a planned and very carefully worked on sequence of events that does not happen without a strong and competent lead on the project. So the team, the community, everyone involved in KiCad is critical to their success, but without a leader who understands and facilitates this kind of interaction, communities can fall apart, communities can disintegrate. And so we have Wayne to thank for setting a strong, positive example for how to create a caring and nurturing community that can grow and meet the needs of all of us together. So please give a warm welcome to Wayne Stambaugh.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction, Seth. I'm not sure how much I deserve all that praise, but I do consider it a privilege to be in the position that I'm in, and I don't take that for granted. And I think that's a lot of the reason why I've been able to do this for such a long time. I think it's now 14 years? I think, yeah, 14 years I've been the project lead. So I really enjoy it, and I'm thankful to be here. So today I'm going to talk about what's going on in KiCad. I know I've talked to a lot of you face-to-face over the last day, so some of this you may already know. If this talk looks familiar, it's going to be very similar to what I typically do in FOSDEM. The only difference is the FOSDEM will be official, because by then version 9 will be out. We'll have probably a team meeting with the dev team to talk officially about 10. So I'm going to talk about some of the features that we're going to work on for version 10. That will be official. Yeah, this list is just off the top of my head, so it's not quite complete yet. So don't anybody panic if you don't see your favorite new feature on the list for 10. Okay. So what's going on in the project? Unless you've been living under a rock, you know that version 8 was released on January 31st of this year. So that was the next major release in our annual release cycle. So version 9 will be released on January 31st, 2025, or within usually a few days of that. So talking about what's going on. So version 9, we had a year-end donation campaign. We raised over $100,000 again this year. So that was successful again. So that allows us to continue fund development and pay our development team to do their work. It also helps fund me to come to events like this, so I'm not paying all that out of my own pocket. So last year, for those of you who did not attend, there was the first KiCon Europe in A Coruña, Spain, on September 9th and the 10th. It was a good first effort for KiCon Europe, but A Coruña is nice. It's a quaint little seaside town if you've ever been there, but it's kind of hard to get to. It's a little off the beaten path for having a conference, but it was really a nice event. And so out of that grew the event that you're here at today. So we can thank the people who organized that to at least get the ball rolling. Hopefully this continues to go and grow over the years. The other thing we had a first last year is KiCon Asia in Shenzhen on November 12th. One of our platinum sponsors, Wachu Electronics, who is the parent company of Next PCB, they basically did all the legwork and did all the funding and hosted it. And it was a fairly small event. Was it about 70 people? Yeah, it was 70 people because that's all they had. They used one of their office big spaces as the main room, and but it was very well done. I have to give Wachu praise for doing a really good job. So there's going to be another one again this year. It's going to be at a bigger venue. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So some of you know, during the version 8 development cycle, we added 3 new lead developers to the team. Wachu Next PCB is also paying developers to work. This is not quite exactly right. They're full-time employees. They obviously have their normal Wachu responsibilities, but they are contributing, and they've contributed quite a few major pieces to KiCad in the last 6 months or so. One of the long requested features just went in 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. This is the ODB++ export, which people have been requesting because a lot of people will have vendors whose CAM software, they prefer ODB++ over Gerber. The other thing that happened during V8 was, we got a new head librarian. Karsten is here somewhere. I haven't seen him yet today, but he's here, and he took over the library team. We kind of had a time where we didn't have a lead librarian, and so we brought up. They added 6 new members to that team, so we knocked out. We used to have a very, very large backlog of symbol and footprint requests, merge requests, and they've knocked out quite a bit of that. They've also done a great job of automating, scripting out most of our footprints, which is really nice because it guarantees the quality of our footprints. They'll be consistent. So when they made the change from the IPC, B to C, it was just a simple matter of changing some parameters and regenerating the footprints, and everything is exactly as it should be. So great work by the library team. The other thing that happened that we never had with the project was we now have a technical writer. Graham Keith has done a great job. The KiCad documentation is excellent, and it's up. The development version will lag a little bit, but the stable version is really good. So if you get stuck, you're not sure how to use something, you can search the documentation and find what you need. It's really, really good now. That's one of the things I think I'm most thankful for, because we never had it, and I'm not the best documenter in the world, so it's nice to have somebody handle that. For those of you who didn't hear during the last talk that I gave at FOSDEM, so Worth Electronic, we had been working with them for a while, but they're committed to adding their entire product line. So they have some stuff in there now. I think their surface mount inductor line is 100% as our KiCad libraries. And the reason I think that's significant is, so they also include their 3D models. And if you know anything about how KiCad library works, we use Creative Commons, SS by 4.0, with the exception of basically you're allowed to use it in your own designs without any usage issues. So they actually stepped up, and for a commercial company to adopt a Creative Commons library is pretty rare. So they made all their 3D models available freely for everybody to use. So I think I always like to say it takes the first domino, to get other manufacturers to fall in place. I think as Worth continues to contribute more and more of their products, I think that's a big win for KiCad. It's also a big win for their users too, or their people who use their products. One of the reasons we did a KiCon in Asia last year is right now our biggest increase in users is in Asia. For the long time, Europe and the US were the two biggest countries of use or areas of use, but Asia is just on this really sharp increase in use. And so that's why the KiCon Asia exists, so we can kind of reach out to those users and bring them on board. We currently have 6 platinum, 5 silver, and 7 bronze sponsors. Interestingly, we have no gold sponsors, so it seems like everybody wants the platinum or the bronze. So it's interesting. We're going to have 3 KiCad conferences annually. I'm happy to announce that there will be one in the U.S. next year, along with the Europe and Asia conferences. And so the next one, I think, says it all. Even though the first KiCon was in the United States in Chicago in 2019, we haven't had one since. Organizing it has been, it hasn't quite. I think we have things in place now where we can organize it, and so I'm really looking forward to that. And for those of you who aren't aware, there's now, you've seen some of the merchandise out front. There's other merchandise like mugs and water bottles and hats. So if you're interested in KiCad swag, head over to the KiCad store. The link is in the document. So head over to the store and purchase some KiCad swag. That's all the donations go to KiCad. So anything that doesn't pay for the actual item itself, the rest of it goes to the KiCad project. So I always like to give props to our platinum sponsors. And Eisler, and this is in alphabetical order, so there's no, but Eisler not only was our very first platinum sponsor, they're also probably our oldest sponsor. So, I want to thank Eisler and DAI. They're one of our newest sponsor. DigiKey's been a long time supporter of the project. They're the reason we own the KiCad.org domain name. So thanks to them for purchasing that and donating it to the project. Watch You Next PCB, they're also a pretty recent addition, and they provide a lot of support. They have forums for Chinese users so that they can communicate with each other natively, their native language, rather than trying to figure out the English forum. So obviously KiCad Services Corporation, we also donate to the project because it's our business, and we think it's a good idea to do that. And our friends at PCBWay, who provided some of the badge electronics, thanks to them, they're also one of our platinum sponsors. So what's coming up for version 9? So I want to talk about that a little bit. I want to first preface this by saying this is not a complete list. This is most of the major front-facing things that you would see as a user when you start using version 9. This list would be 5 times longer if I included all the UI improvements, all the library improvements, all the documentation improvements that have happened during this development cycle. This is just a list of the highlights. So keep that in mind, because as you use KiCad, there'll be a lot of, or if you've used a nightly build, you'll be aware of some of this. Some of this you may not be aware of. So we talked about this a little bit yesterday with the Python bindings. This is an internal change. It's not front-facing, but it's a big change. And so we now have IPC support for the schematic and board editor APIs. It's a true API. And then we also have bindings for KiCad and Rust, and they're in their own separate repos on GitLab. This one hasn't happened yet. I'm hoping it makes it in. One of our devs said he's going to get it done. So one of the things we like to be able to do is people like to reorganize their toolbars as they like to see fit. Right now, we don't have that support. WX widgets is always been a little weak in that area, but we're going to try to get that in. Visual diff merge tool for Git. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we're hoping it happens. That's why chances are, if there's no screenshot, it means there's no screenshot, nothing for me to take a screenshot of. But yeah, we hope to get that in, which will allow you to decide whether or not you want to accept 2 different, when you have a merge conflict, which one of the conflicts do you want to work on. One thing we did do is we're now embedding a lot of information in the KiCad files. This way here, you don't have to have an external link, and so makes the files a little bit more portable. It also makes them a lot bigger, so keep that in mind when you use these features. So you can now embed the worksheet files, like for the schematic and the board, so you have a custom worksheet with your own special title block and all the stuff that's defined with it. You can now store that, embed that right into the schematic and board files directly instead of having it linked to an external file. There's now a PADS project importer. Is that done yet, or is that? I know somebody. I think Ian's working on that, right? Somebody's working on that. So somebody said they'd get it done. So that's another one that may or may not happen. Hopefully it does. Custom DRC and ERC errors and warnings. So you can now create your own custom ERC and DRC errors for various things, and you can see here. He put in a little in there, so, maybe you want to do some calculation. You leave yourself a note. Oh yeah, at some future point I need to do this, right? And you can see in the schematic as it says calculate proper value because the resistor doesn't have a value. So you can do things like that you couldn't do before. We've always had ERC and DRC exclusions. You can exclude an individual ERC and DRC error. Now you can add a comment to that as to why you might want to exclude that. Maybe you have some weird corner case, and no matter what you do, you get a DRC error. You might say, hey, this is okay because I know this part of the board, it's safe to violate this DRC error. So you can now create comments for those. So many of you are familiar with the command line interface. You can now do ray traced 3D models or ray trace 3D renders from the, before you could just get the standard graphics, standard image file out. Now you can do the ray trace as well. We now have a table editor. So we now support tables in all the editors, the board, schematic, symbol, and footprint editors. There's a table, and it comes along with a tool that allows you to do like custom tables like you would be able to do in most other applications that support tables. We're going to work, this has been a long requested feature. The command line tools somewhat make this a little bit less needed because you can script, but some people like to be able to organize all their project outputs in a single place, click a button, and generate all your outputs in one shot. So there's going to be a new jobs tool in 9. The other thing we've done is another thing that you can embed now are fonts, right? So if you have a custom font that may not exist, if the font issue has existed as long as computers with different fonts existed, right? If you have a custom font, on somebody else's computer, you send them a document and you don't have that font, doesn't render the same. You can embed fonts in all the files now. But like with the same caveat, keep in mind they can get rather large, so it's always going to be an issue. So schematic editor. So what's new in the schematic editor? There's now a synchronization tool, and you see here playing. You can now synchronize the pins on a sheet with the hierarchical ports on the schematic, and it's bidirectional. So like if you add a new port name to the sheet, when you open the schematic, it'll be there, and vice versa. You can delete them. So you have a single place, because in the past what you did was for those of you who use hierarchical sheets, you know that you go down in your sheet, you add all your hierarchical ports, and then when you come back up to the sheet, then you place your, now you can do it in a single place and they all get synced back and forth. So that's a handy tool. There's rule areas. Right now you can only assign a net class to a single wire or single net. We now have a little, where you draw a box around a group of nets, and you can assign it to you can assign a single net class to multiple nets. So you can do that now. Design blocks. So there's a new, this was just committed recently. You're going to be able to create arbitrary blocks of schematic blocks that are like that can be arranged in a library, and then you can use those in all your designs. So you can have reference schematics for different pieces, bits and pieces. And this is the first part of a larger goal to eventually those things are going to be tied. We're going to tie those to a layout block as well for the board. So this is just the first step of that. So originally the Net Navigator, there's a navigator that allows you to, like when you have really a deeply nested hierarchies with a lot of nets, sometimes following the nets is difficult. Even if you highlight one, you have to, and this allows you to do that. Originally it only showed the highlighted net. It now shows all the nets, so you can see the entire net hierarchy of your schematic. There's now selection filters for the schematic editor. So if you look down in the lower left-hand corner, we have a selection filtering like we do for the board editor. You can turn on and off what you're allowed to select. It simplifies. So like if you just want to select all the wires, you turn everything else on but the wires, you just select the whole schematic, it'll just select all the wires. So that's a handy user feature. There's now, you can mark items that exclude from simulation. We couldn't do this, you can't do this in 8, but you can do it in 9. So if you don't want to be able to, say you have like a 0 ohm resistor in there that's just a jumper, and you just say, yeah, exclude, I don't want this in the simulation because it's going to screw up the simulation. So you can do that now. You can do not populate at the sheet level. Prior to this, you can only do not populate at the symbol level. So you had to, if you had a whole sheet of, like, I don't want to populate this whole section of the board, you couldn't do that. Now you can just, you can see from the thing, say do not populate. You'll get the red X that shows up to indicate that whole sheet won't show up in the bill of materials. There's a bunch of new there's some new electrical rule checks. We didn't have one when there's identical names of local and global labels, so that's new. There's also a unconnected wire endpoint. We used to have unconnected pins, but not wire endpoints, so those are new electrical rule checks that are going to be in 9. Can also now assign multiple net classes to a single net. So you can progressively build different rules for a net, and maybe you have a sub rule and then a more complicated rule on top of that, maybe you want to use like net class 1 for all your nets, but you have a tighter definition for maybe one net, and so you add that, that just differs by like one parameter. You can use right now in 8 you can only assign it a single net class. It'll complain if you put multiple net classes on a single net. There's also now highlighting. You can highlight net class by its assigned color. So if you have a net class that has a custom color rather than the default, when you highlight it, it'll show up by that. You can also, when you plot, you can also say whether you want to show the do not populate crosses on your printouts or not. That's new. Reusable schematics, I don't have a great picture for that right now, but that's coming. That's going to be a behind the scenes thing. We're in the process of doing away with sharing sheets the traditional way because it requires so much effort to maintain, and it makes a mess of the schematic files. So we're going to replace that with usable sheets. It'll be probably pretty much transparent unless you use a lot of deeply shared sheets. Then things will going to probably be a little different for you, but for most people, that will be just an invisible change. You can now embed the data sheets. So just like the fonts and the worksheets, you can embed data sheets in the schematic symbols. The Eagle importer has been improved. In 8, you can't import Eagle schematics with modules. They won't import. It'll just ignore all the modules because it doesn't know what to do with them. But we redesigned the Eagle exporter to make some serious improvements to it, and that allowed us to do the module import as well. So that will be in 9. So board editor changes. Board editor got a lot of big changes. Right now in 8, if you use a lot of zones, you know, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to edit them, because you have to edit them one zone at a time, right? Well, there's now a zone manager which allows you to edit all your zones in a single interface, and this is what it looks like here in this. So it allows you to click each net, change or each zone, and then change all the zone properties as you see fit, rather than having to go through one at a time and open each zone and change them. Tom talked about this yesterday, multi-channel designs. I'm not going to expand on that. He did a great job of explaining what that is. That's on its way into version 9, and it'll be available. The last embedded files are 3D models. This one you really want to be careful with, because if you have highly complex 3D models, it will really affect your file load performance, because the 3D models are rather large, but you can do it. So if you want to be able to send your board file to somebody without having to send the external step files, you can embed them right in the board, but just be forewarned, the board will be rather large. I talked about this earlier, ODB++ export. This is now already in, so people can test it out. If your PCB vendor or your pick and place vendor or your assembly vendor require ODB++ format, we have it now. The net inspector, which used to be a dialog, you can now dock it as a panel, so you don't have to deal with the dialog, keep moving it around while you're trying to look at stuff. That's a big improvement. We now have much more granular via tinning, so you can define via tinning on one side or the other side or both sides of the board for all the vias, and then you can do it per via. So you can do the same thing per via. So like if you have individual vias that maybe you only want tinning on the top but not on the bottom, you know, for those of you who do via tinning, you know that kind of granular control might or may not be important, depends on your design. So there was a lot of improvements to the 3D model exporter, including, you can see here, like the exporter now has all the nice silk screen and fancy solder mask exporting. It's very nice. You can now, when you export your 3D models, you can now filter which models you want to include. Maybe you don't want to include some models because they're either too large, or for whatever reason, you can filter out which ones you include and don't include. There's now a differential pair skew DRC check. This doesn't exist in 8. We know there was we're still fiddling with the skew stuff, and so we added a DRC error to do a better job of telling you when there's issues in that. One thing that was recently committed is now there's you can make preset lists of layer pairs. So if you're doing a lot of stuff with blind and buried vias, you can set up a layer pair list that you can scroll, you can go through as you're routing. So maybe you want to route, you want to use this, from 1 to 3, you want a blind via. And so you can set up lists of pairs that you can use while you're doing local routing. For those of you who know, you can't route squares because there's no such thing as a square routing tool. Every route will have some radius on it, so you don't get sharp corners. There's now a tool that allows you to edit like cutouts for your board with they call them dog bones. It's whatever the radius of the cutting tool is, so that rather than a square that you're not going to get, that's not going to exist in your routing, that you can add the dog bones to the shape so that it will represent what your routes actually look like. You can now use an arbitrary reference for the relative position tool. Before, you always did things relative to some fixed coordinate that was already selected. You can now select an arbitrary reference for that. We have cursor snap indicators now. This was a feature that also was just recently added that's really nice. You actually be able to see the cursor. You can see the indicator as you go to the different snap points. It'll show you a snap indication that's where you're going to snap if you click on that point. You can now, so the user layers were always on the top. They're always positive. We now added a way to define, so if you take two user defined layers and you set one as a back and one as a front, the back layer will be mirrored just like the back layer of any other the bottom layer. You get it reversed or mirrored. There's also a guard ring tool. It looks like this is going to be an extension of the zone tool. You can kind of do this now you can draw arbitrary geometry and assign a net to it, but this will be like a cleaner tool that will allow you to create guard rings, which we currently don't have. Miscellaneous, here's an interesting, so we had somebody step up and provide wire meshes for the 3D model exporter. So here's a wire mesh of internal copper in KiCad it's like an edge connector. And I think this is actually running in a an EM simulation tool. So the first step to get to EM simulation is you got to be able to get 3D geometry in a mesh that's universally accepted. But if you use one of the EM tools, you can now import those you can export those as BREP and OXA formats. Somebody added a tolerance calculator before the regulator tool in our calculator tool was just fixed the nominal value. Now you can, if it's a 1% or 5%, you can see what your tolerances are. Maybe somebody will add temperature coefficient in there too, and you can run it over time. Because I kind of chuckle when I see that because at room temperature that's what the tolerance will be, but that won't be the tolerance across the entire operating temperature. So version 10. So that's what we have on store for version 9. This was a slightly different dev cycle. I think we had a lot more features in V8. Some of these features were a lot more complex though. So it looks like we did less. It's not necessarily true. It's just some of these features required a lot of retooling under the hood. And those changes tend to be a lot more invasive. So what do we have planned for V10? And take this with a grain of salt because this isn't official just yet. As many of you have noticed over the years, KiCad has moved away from we're migrating away from everything as a standalone application to more project-centric philosophy. If you notice, your project files have a lot more information in them than they used to, and that's only going to continue to increase. So we'd like to move to a tabbed user interface, a single main window, and be able to open multiple projects at the same time. So we really would like to have a multiple document interface. I think that's been on the radar for a while. We've been restructuring code to allow us to do that. Whether that happens in 10 or not, that's a tall order, but I think eventually we're going to be there. And when we do that, that'll be the end of the standalone editors. When you open a schematic, it's just going to be like it is when you open it as part of the project now. Design Migration Wizard, we kind of have a hodgepodge of third-party importers, the way you import them. We're really like to kind of have a common interface for whether your import right now, the Eagle import, the All-Team import, pads, or all the importers have like a slightly different way to do it. In the future, we'd like to kind of have a common interface for all the importers. Importers are important because there's a lot of people out there that have lots of legacy designs, and so it's nice to have a way to import, I will say that even though besides some of the quirks, our importers do a really good job. It's surprised me because I know how hard it is to import things and get the fidelity relatively accurate. I mean, I know other tools have trouble with it, so I'm not surprised that, I'm always surprised ours do as good a job as they do. One of the things that's going to change that will help with library management is you're going to be able to, we want to chain library tables. So you'll be able to enter a pointer to another library table in your current library tables. This will allow you to have like sub libraries defined, and that will be like a tree. So you can add to each table, library table down the chain. This will allow you to, when we upgrade from versions and the libraries all change, this is one of the reasons we're doing this, because the way we do it right now is a little cumbersome for users. If you've gone through that transition from like 6 to 7, 7 to 8, you know what I'm talking about. As your libraries change, this will make life easier for us and easier for you. Bezier curve editing tool. It's kind of ironic. We've actually supported Bezier curves in KiCad for almost ever. The only time we use them is when we import them from third-party tools. There's no way there's no way to manually edit them right now. There's no tool. We'd like to provide a tool for all the editors that do that. Gita project importer, that was supposed to be on 9, but that got bumped. But there's still some people with Gita projects around, and we'd like to be able to import them. Pin gate swapping, although after listening to Tom's talk yesterday, maybe we won't do that. I don't know. Tom said it was so fast he didn't think it was worth doing, but no, we do want to do pin gate swapping, because there's a lot of times when you want to be able to, for routing purposes, you want to be able to flip pins and so that you get cleaner routing. Flat schematics, I know that's kind of been on our list for a while. We haven't, it's kind of come and gone. It's still, it's something we want to do. So you, instead of having to be 100, right now KiCad is, you can only do hierarchical sheets. If you want to add multiple schematics, it's a hierarchy. We do want to add flat, the ability to do flat schematics, but that'll probably happen hopefully happen in 10. Variants, I talked about this earlier. I was supposed to get this done for 9, but I ran into issues when I was doing trying to fix the shared schematic issue, because that code is really messy. So once I fix the shared schematics, then we can design variants. If variants will be possible. Right now, they're just not the way way we internally handle instance data. So that will happen in 10. One of the things that people know is, the footprint libraries are one footprint per file. The symbol libraries are multiple symbols per file. So there's a little disconnect. This is also on my radar because that kind of happened on my watch. People have requested, hey, I'd like a library that's just a single, you'd be able to support a single symbol, right? Like the footprint editor. And so we'd like to do, I would like to come up with a hybrid model so that it doesn't matter how many files you have under there or how many footprints and or symbols are in each library file. It'll just parse all of them. So that's kind of on my radar. Stacked pin definitions, this is one that I think was originally on 9, didn't make it. So right now, if you want to draw a symbol that, you have a complex FPGA and you have 80, or 40 ground pins, you don't want to draw 40 pins. Right now, we have a crude hack where you can stack 40 pins on top of each other. But it's kind of ugly and it's cumbersome to do. We want to be able to just create a list or an array of pins and say all these pins are the same, and then when you plop that down, you get one ground pin. When you plop that down in your schematic, it'll just expand the list or array of pins in the symbol instead of having to do it the way we do it now. Pad stacks, that looks like it might make it in 9. I know John's working on that kind of. I noticed the last day there, a little bit of chatter has picked up on that. So maybe that one might get promoted to 9. So it was on the fence there for a while, but maybe the internal code is actually done for pad stacks. I think he did that a while ago, but the user interface for it is still in progress. So maybe that makes it into 9. Automatic neck down, people doing, high density BGAs. This is something we know we need to work on. That's I know that's on the docket, but that didn't make it in 9. Yeah. A flexible grid system. We want to be able to do things like polar grids instead of just linear rectangular grids, and be able to do like custom grid spacing for people who do like LED patterns. You can make a custom grid that allows you just snap your LEDs down where you want them instead of having to go through and calculate the positions to make your spirals or whatever else it is you do with LEDs. And conversely, for the footprint libraries, people also requested the opposite for footprint libraries. They just want to be able to put all their footprints in a single library file. So right now they have to be individual files. So that's also part of that library normalization work. And then there's the holy grail, EM simulation. We've been talking about this for a long time. We've had people work on it and play around with it. It seems like it should be possible. We're still running into issues where the simulation libraries, we don't quite have them as cross-platform usable as they need to be. KiCad has a very, very strict policy. There are no second-class platforms in KiCad. In other words, if a feature's in Linux, it has to be in it has to be in Mac OS and Windows. Otherwise, it doesn't go. And so, I always say it's easy to get it to work in Linux because Linux is the build platform that's just easy to build. It's just easy to work with. But Mac OS and Windows tend to be a little bit more complicated, and so we've kind of standardized on VC package for Windows, but sometimes we've had to help package the libraries to be able to use them so we don't have to maintain like a custom fork to be able to build on Windows. So I think that hurdle we can overcome that hurdle. It's just some of the projects have not been as receptive to the ideas we would like them to be. And so that's one of the reasons why EM simulation probably hasn't progressed as far as it has. I'm hoping that might happen in 10. I'm not gonna hold my breath. We need the cooperation of other people to make that happen. That's outside the control of the project itself, but it's one of those things that people have asked for, and we now that we can export the wireframes, we know we can provide it. We just need the solver libraries to kind of help us out a little bit. So that's where we are. And like I said, this list is not complete. I just threw this together based on we have an internal document on the project where we track things, what's done, what's not done. So this is kind of like a short list, but I know there's other things people are interested in working on. So this list will get fleshed out by FOSDEM and probably be a lot more complete. So to wrap this up, I want to say thank you to everybody, to all of our sponsors and everyone who's donated to the KiCad project. I can't stress this enough, how important that is. I mean, I think it helps the quality, it helps the overall project. I think it's a great incentive for the development team to help. It's nice to throw money, give them a little money here and there. It's also nice to put on events like this. That all comes from donations, whether they're our sponsors or whether they're you as an individual who buy the tickets. It's fantastic that all of you do that, so thank you. I always say I'm the front man. I'm like Roger Daltrey of The Who. I don't think I'm the band. I'm just the guy everybody knows. But there are a lot of people that work tirelessly on KiCad, and I cannot thank them enough. I'm thankful to be able to work with such a group of talented people. I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said I would stack the KiCad development team up to any development team, commercial or otherwise, anywhere. There's a bunch of really sharp people that's just a pleasure and a joy to work with. So thanks to those people. Thank you for your use and support and interest of the KiCad project. Without users, it doesn't matter. It's the old tree falls in the woods. It doesn't make a noise analogy. If nobody used KiCad, I wouldn't be standing here giving this presentation. So thank you for using KiCad. Special thanks to the folks that organized this event. For those of you, yes, thank you. So anybody who's ever put on an event like this knows it's not a non-trivial amount. It's not a trivial amount of work. And so, yeah, we're just glad that somebody stepped up and took that task on. And yeah, we've had this, it's been a really nice conference so far. I've enjoyed every minute of it. So great work, guys. And I hope to see you all at a conference next year. There, like I said, there will be one in the U.S. Are we officially at Long Beach? Okay, I got the thumbs up from Seth. So Seth's organizing that in Long Beach. So for those of you who don't know, Long Beach, California is basically the greater LA area. It's north of LA, right? South. You know, yeah, get my geography right. So yeah, so it'll be an easy, for those of you who fly in and out, it's going to be LAX, so it should be a pretty easy get to. LAX is a major hub for just about every major airline, so you should be able to get there reasonably well. So yeah, and for those of our friends down under, there'll be a KiCon Asia. That'll be close for them to attend. I'm hoping to see more of our down under users in the future. So yeah, I hope to keep seeing you, and thanks for coming. I appreciate it and enjoyed it. So we'll have any questions. I know we had the roundtable yesterday. I'm hoping we answered most of your questions. But yeah, if you have any questions about anything I presented here, I'd be more than happy to answer them at this point.
Regarding that routing or milling tool, can you please go to slide 45?
Why is it not 45?
Yeah, that triangle in the...
Oh, no, there it is. The dog bone tool?
Yes, the dog bone tool, exactly. That triangle, that bottom triangle, these sharp corners on the left and right, they wouldn't be manufacturable, would they?
None of these, if this was an internal route.
Okay, that's just a mock-up.
Yeah.
Okay.
If any of these was an internal route, and that's what this is for. So like, yeah, let's say you have a cutout in your board. Don't go over the line.
Yeah, okay.
There's a cutout in your board, all
Yes.
router tools are round. Router bits are round.
Yes, that's what I mean, because the radius, okay.
Yeah, the radius has to fit, yeah.
If you need to put something through the board, yeah.
But the radius of the mill is larger than
Look at the shape.
the shape.
You can't get in the
It could be,
triangle.
exactly, yes.
Oh, maybe. Yeah, John, to be fair, this isn't my screenshot. This is the person who developed it. He may not have set the mill shape. He may have just used the same mill shape for the other radiuses.
No, so please report that does require special handling for acute angles, and it looks like the acute angles are not being properly handled yet. So so that would be an excellent bug report. We'll mention it to John.
Would there be separate content for the US and Europe KiCons if you do separate conferences such that people like me who can't get enough of it can attend both and get something out
Yes.
of it?
Well, so I will say that depends. I mean, it really depends on the people who step up and do presentations. But I suspect there'll be some overlap. Like this, since I do the keynotes about what's going on in the project. That's typically what people want to hear about from me. So, but the individual presenters and like content, some of the content here I saw today was completely new, right? So it all depends on who steps up to present. But yeah, I suspect there might be some overlap in some areas, but I think on the whole, generally, it's whatever the presenters. So there will be a lot of deviation in what gets presented because people have all kinds of. I mean, people use KiCad. I'm always amazed at when I hear somebody. I remember talking to the Libra space guys a couple years ago at FOSDEM, and I just happened to be walking up to get the bus to go back to the hotel, and they saw me and they came over and and they showed me one of the little CubeSats that they had with them that all the boards were designed with KiCad. And this is up in space and you got board. So it's fun. So it's fun when people present stuff like that, like all the different uses of KiCad. And so that covers a lot of ground. So I suspect that, every conference is going to have its own. I don't know if anybody saw the videos from KiCon Asia last year. Somebody actually wrote a Python script was it wire bonding, right? It was like, you couldn't have drawn it because I think it was because KiCad, the board editor, has 1 nanometer resolution. We don't have any 1 nanometer grids. That would be insane. But, he actually used a Python script to create the bonding pads, the lands for a chip. What was it? It's a great video. You should see it. You should watch it. It's just something that somebody did that I had never thought somebody would do, but they did it. So yeah, and just to throw this out there, if you have something that you're doing that's different, like the modular stuff that Odin just did, that's great. I mean, that's the kind of stuff people want to hear about. So if you're doing something like that, something unique or something that's a little off the beaten path, please step up and do a presentation. We love it when we get new presenters that come to the conferences because that makes the conferences more interesting. I mean, if we all came up and did the same, it would die on the vine. But yeah, so if you have some interesting content that you think people might be interested in hearing about, please let me know. Or sign up for when the next conference comes up, sign up for a talk.
Regarding the IPC transformation, will we still be able to use or to do command line applications using that PCB Python module without a running instance of KiCad? No. Oh,
No.
that's a pity.
No,
Okay,
no. The scripts. So the scripts don't need Python. The command line interface that does not require Python. But if you have custom Python scripts that use the PCB new module, that's going to go away when we deprecate. Now that you've got some time to convert over, but yeah, no, IPC's on a running process.
I will need a running GUI instance of KiCad to do something with a board file, for example. The load board and save board functions that we can use currently without a running instance of KiCad, this will be no more possible.
Right. Well, plug it. So the plugins typically.
I don't talk about plugins. I mean the Python PCB new module that you can use in a CLI application.
Yeah.
Not inside PCB new.
Yeah, it's going away.
Okay.
Yeah.
I accept.
Because a lot of the stuff that you can script out a lot of that stuff through the command line interface, like the plotting and the if you need to swing out the API, we're getting away from that. So I'm not opposed to externalize, creating an external project for that, if that's what you're asking. But it's not going to be it's not going to ship with KiCad by default because of all the hoops we have to jump through to get Python to build. Like I said yesterday, we provide our own custom Python interpreter on Windows and Mac OS rather than using the default one. So it's just too much maintenance work for us.
Just to this point, I can add from experience with the GIMP project that it's possible to, for GIMP, it's possible to have a headless application running, so you can communicate with the PDB API of the GIMP to do some actions without having a UI running. And I think a similar solution should be fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it might be possible. I don't think initially we're going to be doing that. It's going to be on a running instance. But, you know, maybe once we have maybe we get the base library stuff. I know Mark's been trying to move stuff into the point where we can have at least maybe a shared library. Then maybe we could access the shared library through the IPC feature, but I don't think that's possible right now. I think that we're going to have some work to do to get there.
Wayne, question about the larger file sizes embedding data. A lot of applications, if you add information, the file increases, and you remove the information, the file doesn't decrease later. How did KiCad project do the increased embedded file sizes?
Seth, that's not true, right? If you remove the embedded file, it's just gone.
Other projects, if you remove the embedded information, it still exists because they have because of how they do their caching. For KiCad, no, you remove the file's gone, the file size goes back to the original, and the file size increase is modest because step files compress really well. So you will try it out, see it generally. A step file on a model is going to generally increase it by a couple of kilobytes, maybe, not so much at all. They're still represented as text data in the models themselves, so
Yep.
they do go into your Git repository without requiring a binary file format. But the overall size, we compress them before we transform them to base 64, so they're not terribly large.
Hello. Are there any ideas about using KiCad for external wire harnesses and electrical installations?
Yeah, this has come up before, and we have improved that somewhat by now you can create wires with different thicknesses and different colors. I know people wanted the candy striped wire, like for wires that have multiple colors, the striped wires, because a lot of wiring harnesses use striped wires for identification purposes. That's a pretty common thing to do. Yeah, I would think KiCad it was not really a wiring harness tool. I understand the appeal of doing that, but it's really not designed to be a wiring harness tool. But I'm not opposed to if somebody could, come up with the bits and pieces to make that a little bit more friendly for people doing wiring harnesses. Yeah, I'm not opposed to doing that. But yeah, there's nothing on the immediate future to see that out. I think for the actual core feature set for KiCad, that's probably pretty far down the list. But once again, if that's something that corporations need and somebody's willing to pay KiCad Services Corporation to do it, then it suddenly becomes a priority. So yeah, I'm not, like I said, I think we can. Like I said, we've made a lot of improvements in that area over the years, just by the fact that you can assign any color to a wire, and you can make it any thickness, arbitrary thickness, so you can make it look nice, more like a wiring diagram. But yeah, we're not really set up to be a pure wire diagramming application.
Yeah.
Is there any plan for like an output wizard to combine like all the production files and stuff under like a combined setting and then
Yeah.
making it easier to
That
go through
was-
the process for multiple how do you
Yeah,
say,
hang on.
revisions and stuff?
God, I hate laptop keyboards. Hang on. That was one of the, it was the output jobs. Dude. It was up here somewhere. It was at the top. It's in the common section. Hang on. Oh, output job. Oh, I went past it. Sorry. The response is a little slower. This is, so what you'll be able to do is you'll be able to create a group of outputs, plots, maybe you wanted step files, whatever outputs, whatever production outputs that you would normally do one at a time, whether you script that out through the command line interface or whether you just plot, maybe you make you export the step model, maybe you export some PDFs for doc control, whatever you do, you'll be able to create a job, which is going to be a list of all those things, and you'll just hit, run job, and it'll just generate all those outputs for you at one time. And then you'll be able to create multiple jobs. Maybe you have a job where this is the board manufacturing stuff, and I just print all the board manufacturing stuff and then put that in an archive and ship it to my board vendor. Or maybe I have, my 3D, my mechanical team needs the step and all the models to be able to put it in some kind of enclosure, and they're responsible for that. So maybe you have a different job for that. Yeah, you'll be able to create multiple jobs for each project. That's what this is. That's what the output job manager's for.
Currently, there is this plugin called KiCad that can do panels from individual boards. So if you have one board and you can just have like a description of how you want to transform this board into a panel, will this be something that can also be included in the output job manager?
Do we currently allow a fixed offset point? I don't think we do. When you plot Gerbers, it's either relative to the drill file origin or the drawing origin, which is 0, 0. I don't think you can add you can programmatically add an origin so that you're talking about offsetting like an array of Gerber outputs that are offset by a fixed XY.
Well, actually, the plugin already does everything. So there is like a easy scripting language where you say how many, what's the orientation of the boards. You can say if you want borders or if you want mills or V-cuts or something like that. Everything is already there.
Right.
You just have to invoke that tool. And so in order to do that, I would think that in the output job manager, it would be necessary to have the ability to call like a plugin or invoke some external thing.
As far as I know, it's not going to do that initially because I think that's going to be plugin dependent because we don't
External commands.
Yeah, we don't. Is there an external command? Do we have external commands in the Mark?
Yeah.
Where's Mark? Oh, okay. So then we can do it. So Mark was working on that. So yeah. So I guess we will be able to do that, assuming that you know what you need to tell your external plugin to do. Then yeah, we can do that. Anybody else?
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.